Food is something we all need. It keeps us alive, fuels our bodies, and brings us comfort. But sometimes it can turn deadly in the most unexpected ways. In this video, we're diving into 5 real stories of the most bizarre and tragic deaths caused by food. These cases are strange, shocking, and a little hard to believe, showing that even something as ordinary as eating can take a terrifying turn. It was April 4th, 2019, in the quiet town of Chorley, Lancashire. Darren Hickey, a 51-year-old wedding venue manager, was wrapping up another workday at Ridgemont House. Darren wasn't just known for his professionalism, he was admired for his strength. Just 7 years earlier, he had survived a massive stroke that nearly took his life. 18 long months in the hospital, relearning how to walk and speak. But he fought, and he won, rebuilding his life with purpose, pouring his energy into charity work, and earning the Stroke Association's Inspirational Person of Courage Award. But that afternoon, something unthinkable happened. Something so small, so ordinary, that it barely registered as a threat. As Darren prepared to leave work, a chef offered him a bite of a fish cake meant for an upcoming event. Just one small taste. Darren, always helpful, took a bite without hesitation. What he didn't know was that the inside was scalding hot. It burned his throat, deep, unseen, and dangerously. He brushed it off, thinking it was just a minor irritation. After all he had been through, this was nothing. Or so he thought. But the pain didn't fade. It worsened. He told his partner, Neil Parkinson, who urged him to get it checked out. Darren made his way to the urgent care ward at Chorley Hospital, explaining the pain, the burn, and his difficulty swallowing. A healthcare practitioner examined him and even consulted with a specialist at another hospital. But because the burn was hidden deep in his throat, out of sight, there were no visible injuries to his mouth or tongue. With little to go on, Darren was sent home with some paracetamol and a warning to return if things got worse. Behind the scenes, the real danger was already building. Later that evening, Darren tried to rest, but the pain didn't rest. His throat was swelling, slowly, silently, and fatally. By 9:45 p.m., Neil heard disturbing sounds. Darren was choking, gasping for air. Neil rushed to him, trying desperately to help. Panic set in. He called for an ambulance, but even that lifeline was delayed. Paramedics lost precious minutes trying to locate their address. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The swelling had completely blocked Darren's airway. He was rushed to Royal Bolton Hospital, but he never regained consciousness. In the early hours of April 5th, Darren was gone, just 12 hours after tasting a fish cake. During the inquest at Bolton Coroner's Court, Dr. Patrick Waugh, the pathologist who examined Darren's body, revealed the horrifying truth. The intense internal burn had caused Darren's voice box to swell to the point where he could no longer breathe. It was something usually seen in industrial accidents or fire victims, not from a bite of food. The tragedy wasn't just in what happened, it was in how invisible it was. No external injuries, no obvious signs, just a slow, silent march toward disaster. The coroner, Alan Walsh, called it what it was, a rare, devastating tragedy. But none of it could bring Darren back. His loved ones, his community, were left stunned, heartbroken. This was a man who had battled back from death once, who gave hope to others, who smiled through pain, gave to charity, and lived with purpose. And now, he was gone because of a single bite. It was October 10th, 2014, in the quiet town of Rhyl, Wales. Vera Williams, a 75-year-old woman living in a peaceful home at Les Tudno, started her day like any other, with a simple breakfast. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place, just toast. But that ordinary meal marked the beginning of a devastating chain of events that would end in tragedy. As Vera bit into her toast, a sharp fragment caught in her throat. It wasn't dramatic, no choking, no gasping for air, just a sudden, uncomfortable pain. She brushed it off, as so many of us would, but inside, something was terribly wrong. Vera, who had long battled severe heart disease, decided to visit the emergency department at Ysbyty Glan, Clwyd. She reported throat pain, hoping for some reassurance. A junior doctor examined her but found nothing alarming. There were no visible signs of anything serious. No blood, no swelling, no obstruction. So, without further tests, she was sent home. But the pain didn't go away. For nearly 2 weeks, Vera lived with that discomfort, quietly, patiently, perhaps hoping it would pass, perhaps thinking it wasn't worth the trouble to go back. She didn't know that inside her body, a time bomb was ticking. On October 23rd, she returned to the hospital. She was seen by Dr. Eddie Adele and mentioned pain in her neck, but she didn't explain that the pain had been with her since her last visit. Without the full picture, Dr. Adele suspected a minor infection. He prescribed antibiotics and sent her home once again. By the next day, everything changed. Vera suddenly began coughing up blood. It was violent, terrifying. She was rushed to the hospital, this time in critical condition. Doctors immediately performed a CT scan, and what they found was shocking. That sharp piece of toast had torn a hole in her esophagus. The injury had gone undetected for weeks, and now it had led to a rare and deadly condition, esophageal perforation. Blood was leaking into her intestines. Her body was failing. This type of injury is incredibly rare, only about 3 cases per million people. But for Vera, it was real, and now it was too late. Surgery might have saved her, but her fragile heart made the operation far too risky. Doctors could only try to manage the damage. Despite their efforts, Vera's condition deteriorated rapidly. A few days later, she was gone. Her death sent shockwaves through the community. How could something as harmless as toast lead to this? An inquest was launched to uncover whether anything could have been done differently. Senior emergency consultant Dr. Marion Hughes reviewed the case and acknowledged the tragic nature of it all. The doctors, she said, had acted based on what they knew. Even in her nearly 40 years of experience, Dr. Hughes had never seen a case like Vera's. That's how rare it was. But the inquest also revealed cracks in the system. At the time, the hospital was still relying on paper records. That meant doctors couldn't easily track a patient's previous visits or see the full timeline of symptoms. Coroner Nicola Jones pointed out that if electronic records had been in place, Dr. Adele might have known Vera had been there just 2 weeks earlier, complaining of throat pain. That could have changed everything. Maybe, but maybe not. Vera's heart condition made any intervention incredibly risky. No one can say for sure if the outcome would have been different. Still, her story forces us to face an unsettling truth. Sometimes, a tiny moment, a bite, a word left unsaid, can set off a fatal chain reaction. It was February 25, 2010, in Invercargill. Inside a modest home, Christopher Hodkinson stumbled upon a scene no partner should ever have to witness. Natasha Harris, the woman he had loved for 15 years, lay slumped against the bathroom wall. Her breaths were short, shallow, fading. Panic set in. He called for help, but it was too late. Natasha died that evening from cardiac arrest. She was just 30 years old. She left behind 8 young children and a partner. As the shock wore off and questions took root, what surfaced was a truth few could have imagined. Natasha wasn't battling drugs or alcohol. Her silent killer? Coca-Cola. Her addiction didn't start with tragedy. It started in her teens, one glass here, another there. But over the years, it spiraled. By the end, she was drinking up to 10 liters of Coke a day, about 18 pints, every single day. That meant more than 11 times the recommended daily sugar intake and double the safe amount of caffeine. Her day began with Coke. It ended with Coke. Without it, she trembled, snapped at her family, and felt herself unraveling. It wasn't just a habit, it was a dependency. Her mother-in-law, Vivian Hodkinson, watched it grow. If the fridge ran low, Natasha grew anxious. For years, she struggled with fatigue. She was constantly nauseous. Her heart raced and her muscles weakened. She vomited often, sometimes daily. Everyone assumed it was stress or unrelated illness. No one thought the soda could be the reason. But inside her body, damage was mounting. Her teeth had rotted and were eventually removed. One of her children was even born without enamel on their teeth, something doctors linked to Natasha's coke intake during pregnancy. And then there was her liver, enlarged, filled with fatty deposits from years of sugar abuse. An autopsy revealed she suffered from hypokalemia, dangerously low potassium levels that can trigger heart failure. Her caffeine intake only made things worse, feeding an irregular heartbeat that would become fatal. On the day she died, Natasha hadn't seemed gravely ill. She felt a bit off, said as much, but not in a way that screamed emergency. Hours later, she collapsed, and when the paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. The inquest that followed peeled back the layers of her life and exposed the consequences of unchecked consumption. Coroner David Crerar was blunt. Without the excessive intake of Coca-Cola, Natasha's death would likely not have happened. Not the way it did, not when it did. He pointed to the metabolic chaos inside her, the caffeine, the sugar, the potassium crash. Health experts weighed in. Drinking that much fluid every day could be dangerous. Coca-Cola Oceania, for their part, expressed regret over the death, but pushed back. They claimed there was no clear proof their product caused the cardiac arrest. They said they couldn't control how much a person chose to drink. But the coroner didn't stop there. He urged Coca-Cola to put caffeine labels on their bottles. He called for warnings about excessive consumption, and he asked the New Zealand Ministry of Health to consider tighter regulations on caffeinated beverages. Would labels have made a difference? Some weren't so sure. Natasha smoked heavily. She often ignored medical advice. She was exhausted, trapped in a cycle of giving everything to her kids and saving nothing for herself. Her sister, Riya, described the coke as her escape. Others reached for alcohol, some used drugs. Natasha had soda, that's how she coped. She poured herself into her children, often skipping meals to make sure they were fed. She spent weeks planning their birthdays, hoping to make each one magical. Her world revolved around them, but her body, quietly, was giving out. After she died, Christopher tried to care for their children, but the burden was too much. Eventually, the kids were placed into state care. Christopher's life spiraled with grief, financial strain, and legal trouble. It was the evening of July 20th, 2022, in Mumbai. There was 27-year-old Riya Nisha, a young woman carving out her place in the world. Life hadn't been easy. She shared a modest home in the narrow lanes of Malad West with her husband and brother-in-law. That night, a quiet, almost invisible detail unraveled everything. Their home had been fighting a silent war, rats. Like many in the city, Riya had grown used to solving problems with grit and ingenuity. Her solution? A simple one. She injected poison into a few tomatoes, intending to lay them out for the rodents. A necessary risk, she thought. A smart fix? She placed the bait aside, tucked away from the food, and carried on with her day. Hours later, weary from the Mumbai heat and another exhausting day, Riya longed for something warm and easy. Instant noodles, comfort food. Her hand reached for a tomato, one she had poisoned herself. She sliced it, dropped it in, stirred the pot, and unknowingly sealed her fate. Riya ate her noodles without a second thought, but the moment of peace was brief. Her stomach turned. At first, it seemed mild, maybe indigestion, but within minutes the pain sharpened. Nausea twisted through her body, and her strength began to vanish. Her husband and brother-in-law, alarmed by her sudden condition, rushed her to Shatabdi Hospital. But the poison was already working its way through her. The doctors tried urgently, but it was too late. Riya's body could not fight what she had unknowingly put inside it. 2 days later, on July 22nd, she died. Her family was left in pieces, the kind of pain that hangs in the corners of a home for years. That kind of loss doesn't fade, it just lingers. And then, barely a month later, it happened again. On August 13th, in Sakinaka, another part of Mumbai, 24-year-old Kajal Par made a mistake no one should have to die from. She wasn't feeling well, a stomach ache, just discomfort. She reached for what she thought was medicine. It was rat poison. She swallowed it before realizing something was wrong, a burning in her throat, a feeling that didn't match a normal remedy. Panic surged. Alone and terrified, Kayo called her mother. She described the pain, begged for help. Her mother and brother raced to her. They took her to a nearby hospital, but her body was already in distress. She was transferred again to a larger facility, then again, this time to KEM Hospital. Each time, the news got worse. The poison had ravaged her liver. Her organs were failing. Despite everything doctors tried, her body was slipping beyond reach. 6 days after it all began, on August 19th, Kajol passed away. Her husband, Abhishek, was on a trekking trip when she died. He returned to a silence that no phone call could prepare him for. Police, once again, found no signs of foul play. Just another tragic, avoidable death. Another moment's distraction that turned fatal. 2 young women, 2 homes, 2 fatal mistakes. It was a quiet, uneventful Monday morning on August 16, 2010, in the sleepy town of Nebworth, Hertfordshire. For Mitchell Kerry, a 43-year-old graphic designer and father of 2, it began like any other day. He skipped breakfast that morning, rushing off to work, thinking he'd grab something later. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another busy start in a routine life. But that one small decision, to wait until lunch, would be the beginning of something no one could have seen coming. By noon, hunger had set in. Mitchell stepped out of the office and walked to a nearby cafe, something he'd done countless times before. He ordered a simple corned beef sandwich. Quick, familiar, safe. He returned to his desk and unwrapped the sandwich, taking bites between tasks. Everything seemed fine, but within 25 minutes, Mitchell's body began to betray him. He broke out into a cold sweat, his face pale, and he clutched his stomach. The pain was so violent he stripped off his clothes, desperate for relief, describing it to co-workers as 10 out of 10. Alarmed, they called for emergency help. Paramedics arrived swiftly and rushed him to Lister Hospital in Stevenage. At the hospital, doctors suspected food poisoning. Painful, but manageable. They gave him painkillers and sent him home. Rest and fluids, they said. Take it easy. That night, Mitchell tried to follow their advice, curling up at home, trusting the worst was over. But the worst was just beginning. By the next morning, August 17th, Mitchell was in agony. He was vomiting uncontrollably, his body racked with intense cramps. His wife, Debbie, watched in horror as he deteriorated before her eyes. Then, suddenly, he collapsed. She dialed emergency services, panic setting in. Paramedics arrived, but what they found was far more serious than anyone had imagined. Mitchell had already suffered a heart attack. His organs were failing. Every minute mattered. They rushed him back to the hospital, where doctors fought to keep him alive, but nothing worked. In the early hours of August 18th, surrounded by machines and desperate hands trying to save him, Mitchell slipped away. The cause? A microscopic killer. Tests revealed a rare bacterial infection, Clostridium perfringens type A, a strain so deadly, so swift, that only 7 other cases had ever been documented around the world. Once inside the bloodstream, it moves fast, shutting down organs, overwhelming the immune system, and almost always fatal. In Mitchell's case, the sandwich he ate, something so small, so mundane, was likely the source. A few contaminated bites, and it was already too late. Health officers tested the cafe's corned beef, but found no contamination. It was frustrating. No clear culprit, no charges, no answers. But the timeline was undeniable. Experts agreed. The sandwich was almost certainly the trigger. The shock of Mitchell's death rippled far beyond his workplace and home. He wasn't just another name on a hospital chart. Mitchell had already faced tragedy once. His first wife, Anna Wilson, had died young in 1998 from a rare cancer. She was only 31. Anna was the daughter of beloved TV presenter and former Arsenal goalkeeper Bob Wilson. When Anna passed, Mitchell stayed close with her family. Bob and his wife Megs thought of him like a son. He had rebuilt his life, slowly, painfully. In 2004, he found love again with Debbie Smith, a close friend of Anna's. They married, they built a home together. He raised his sons, Dylan and Yuan, then just 9 and 7. They were a quiet family in a quiet town, until their world shattered again. This wasn't just about bad luck or freak odds. It was about how fragile life can be. how fast the ground can fall out from under you. Coroner Edward Thomas called it one of the rarest cases he'd ever seen. He ordered that Mitchell's case be shared with the Department of Health to raise awareness. The official cause of death: multiple organ failure caused by a rare bacterial infection that triggered a deadly chain reaction inside his body. The cafe, the suppliers, and the supermarket chain Aldi all were questioned, but no charges were brought. No one was found at fault. The system said everything was safe, but Mitchell's family had no one to blame, no one to hold accountable, only a cruel twist of fate. Mitchell Kerry didn't die from negligence. He didn't take a risk or ignore warning signs. He just bought a sandwich, the kind you or I might eat without thinking twice. That's what makes this so terrifying.